Good afternoon, everybody. Alex and Angie here. We are excited to have you all this afternoon for our fun COBRA conversation we're going to have. It is exactly 1:30 Central Standard Time. We'll give everybody another minute or so, give everybody time to log on. I know we had quite a few people who were had RSVP'd and we're not quite at that number yet. So give us just a few minutes and we'll get rolling here. We're excited to see all of you and give you some fun information about COBRA this afternoon. Okay. Well, it looks like we're going to go ahead and begin. We are recording this webinar and we will be posting our webinars just for future reference for everybody. So if you would like to share, they will be live on our public YouTube channel, so feel free to do that. I'll send out a thank you afterwards that you guys can all see a copy of the slides, the presentation as well. And like I said, feel free to share. I'm going to go ahead and bring up our little slideshow here. As long as I can figure out which one it is. There we go. And Angie, can you see it okay?
I can.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so just a few housekeeping things here before we get started. Of course, everybody is, we are recording, and so everybody is muted as of right now. We will have a Q&A session after we are complete with our presentation, so please hang on to those questions. You can also type them in the chat box, and we'll get to them at the end as they come up for you as well. And make sure you let everybody see them, because if you have the question, somebody else likely does too. So I will go ahead and bring in our amazing expert, Angie, our VP of Compliance and all things exciting. So I am Alexandria, and I will go ahead and let Angie take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Welcome, everybody, to the first in our new series called our Compliance Corner. So each month we are going to feature a particular compliance topic for you. July's topic is going to be all about COBRA, which actually makes perfect sense considering some of the recent changes that have occurred with COBRA. So we're excited to bring these to you. And I'm going to just turn off my video to spare my bandwidth while we go further. So Alex, go ahead and move to the next slide. And please, as Alex mentioned, everyone, don't hesitate to drop your question in the chat box as you get the question pop up for you, and we will be addressing those towards the end of the presentation. We want to make sure that any questions you have get answered. This presentation is really all about you all, to make sure that you are up to speed on anything and everything you may need to know about compliance, and today featuring COBRA. So let's talk a little bit about COBRA. We'll go way back to 1985 when COBRA was enacted. COBRA stands for Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. That is a mouthful, hence the acronym of COBRA. This was passed really back in the 80s as a result of the recession that was going on. The goal around COBRA is to give employees and their families that ability to continue health coverage when their group plan is no longer available to them. Now, a lot of states have enacted what is called mini COBRA. The traditional federal COBRA regulations are for organizations that have 20 or more employees and that currently provide a group health plan. If you fall under that realm, then COBRA is a responsibility for you. Now, for those groups that are less than 20, it's important to make sure you're aware of what your state is doing with regard to mini COBRA laws, which generally apply to groups of 1 to 19 employees when there is a group health plan in place. Next slide, please. So oftentimes folks wonder, well, why do we still need COBRA when we have the exchanges? And we really were wondering if there were going to be any significant changes after the passage of the Affordable Care Act because of the either state or federal marketplaces out there. But COBRA still is a very important, valuable resource for employees. Now, generally, COBRA is going to grant 18 months or up to 18 months of coverage, in some circumstances up to 36 months, depending on the qualifying event. What I want to point out is, although we do have the individual marketplace to access healthcare these days, and oftentimes it can be much less expensive, I just want to remind you that other plans are not necessarily out on the exchange. So for example, if an employee had dental and vision coverage through their employer, and now they have lost the eligibility, whether, it was one of these qualifying events listed, divorce, termination, reduction of hours, things like that, where they may be interested in going out to the marketplace and obtaining their medical coverage, they may still want to keep their dental and vision through COBRA. So hence another reason why, despite the passage of the Affordable Care Act and the exchanges and the marketplace out there now, there are still other facets to COBRA that we need to be aware of. And again, it's not just termination of employment. If your employee has their spouse on the benefits with them and there's a divorce, that spouse who isn't the employee is eligible for COBRA to continue the benefits that they previously had while married to your employee. So several different types of qualifying events. Now, when there's a qualifying event, the type of event is also going to help determine how long they can keep their COBRA coverage. So it's important to make sure you are aware of those facets. Next slide, please, Alex. What I want to point out next are some of the penalties for non-compliance. Now, although COBRA's been around since 1985, it's still something that often gets missed in the shuffle. And we're going to look at some of the common mistakes that are made. But based on those different types of mistakes we're going to look at on the next slide, these are some interesting types of penalties that an employer can incur by not being in compliance with the rules and regulations of COBRA. These can get very, very costly. There has been much litigation around COBRA that has set several precedents and what the courts are looking at, these prior litigation that has occurred. And truly the burden of proof is on the employer to prove whether they provided the notice. Was the notice applicable? Did it have all the proper model information on it? Was it sent in the right time frame as is required by the rules? Next slide, please. Let's take a look at some of the common mistakes. Common mistakes that we see or hear about or have seen in litigation are failure to give that general notice to your new employees. So when a new employee has gotten to their end of their waiting period and they're now eligible for coverage, that general initial notice needs to get provided and sent out. That notice is essentially saying, hey, congratulations, you are now on the group benefits. In the event one of these types of qualifying events occur, you are eligible to apply for COBRA coverage. So that general notice is very important. The second notice is that election notice. So in the event there's one of those qualifying situations, an employee is terminated or an employee has a reduction of hours and they lose their eligibility, the employer only has 14 days to get them that election notice, to let them know, here are the plans that you were enrolled in that you can pick up on COBRA. Here's the date that your coverage ends, how long they have to elect COBRA, what the cost is. The Department of Labor has model notices for both the general notice and the election notice, so it's important that you're utilizing those. If you're trying to administer in-house, there are some resources out there to support you, but these timelines are very, very critical. It's also important that we're offering open enrollment to those folks that are on COBRA already. So if you think about when your benefits renewal is coming due and you're shopping it out, your broker's taking a look at other options, you know, especially since our rates tend to go up all the time, it's always good to be, you know, proactive and looking around to see what's out there. Once you make your decision, if you're going to make a change in the benefits for the enrollment period or the renewal period, you want to make sure you're providing that information to your COBRA beneficiaries as well. It's important to make sure you're recognizing the different types of qualifying events. Be very careful. Don't provide COBRA coverage for longer than is required. So we talked about that 18 months. Up to 29 months if they have the Social Security disability qualification, or death or divorce, you know, or loss of dependent status can, you know, get you the 36 months. So it's important to know exactly how much time you're allotting them to be on COBRA, should someone choose to maintain COBRA for their entire duration. Certainly failing to terminate coverage when it's allowable. There are only certain situations where you can terminate someone's COBRA coverage. You know, making sure you understand the Medicare requirements. When you have someone that is on COBRA and becomes Medicare eligible, there's a very big difference between eligible and entitled to Medicare. It's important to not try to extend COBRA timelines incorrectly or outside of the rules and regulations. And for me, the biggest is failing to document when notices were sent. When you're sending COBRA notifications, because this falls in the realm of ERISA, you've got to be very careful in how you are distributing these notices to employees. You can't necessarily just hand it to them or send it to them via email. There are protocols that have to be put into place when it comes to this type of communication. In order to electronically deliver COBRA notices, an employee must elect and agree to receive them electronically. They do not have to elect to do that, and they do not have to agree to do that. And if they don't, then it's important that you're mailing those pieces via first-class mail. After you have the envelope prepared, it's addressed, and it has the first-class postage applied to it, you want to make sure that you're photocopying that envelope and saving that in the file. So this is one of those arenas where it's super critical that you're documenting, making copies, everything that is sent, you have copies of, including the timeline. If it's ever called into question, you're going to have the documentation readily available to support what you have done. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about some changes that have occurred. As much as I'm sure we're all tired of talking about COVID-19 and the changes in legislation, more recently, this change has occurred, so I thought it would be important to bring up today that due to everything going on in the world with coronavirus, it's important to know that there has been an extension to some of these timelines. This was put into place by the Department of Labor, Treasury Department, and the IRS. They all put this together to make sure that COBRA qualifiers have enough time to make the decision whether they want to elect COBRA. It's important that they have enough time to then make their premium payments and things like that. With everything going on, you know, it's not just a global health crisis right now, but it's certainly an economic one on top of the health situation. So these extensions are now in place. Next slide, please. Anything as of March 1st and after, when the national emergency was announced, essentially the time frame that an employee has to elect COBRA. So traditionally, they have 60 days to elect whether they want to take COBRA or not. With this extension, essentially what it means is that 60-day time clock does not actually start until the end of the outbreak period has been announced. Currently, we have no end date announced. So it's almost like an unlimited extension right now. So it's very important that you're keeping your records up to date. So if someone was eligible to elect COBRA, let's say May 1st, you know, we've really got to leave that kind of open-ended until we truly know when the government announces an end to the national emergency. At that point, then we can start the 60-day clock. Now, after an employee elects COBRA, they have 45 days to make their first premium payment. That timeline has also been extended. That 45 days does not start until the end of the outbreak period has been determined. It's real important that you understand what that extension means and what it looks like for anyone that you have on COBRA currently that have payments traditionally due, for anyone that's still in their election period to determine whether they want to go on COBRA or not. It's important that you know those. Next slide, please. So the one questionable item, and I've seen this a couple of different ways. I've seen that yes, the timeline is also extended for employers, and I've seen that no, it is not extended for employers. So I always err on the side of caution. Being in compliance, that's kind of my normal go-to. So what I'm recommending at this point is the 14 days that we talked about earlier. So you have 14 days with which to send the election notice to an employee once the qualifying event occurs. At this time, our recommendation is truly adhere to that 14 days. I cannot find yet a definitive, yes, you have some time as an employer over that 14 days or no. So I'm going to strongly recommend that you adhere to that 14 days. Now, we talked about the timeline to accept COBRA. This is 60 days. However, our 60-day time clock has not started yet. It's now not based on the qualifying event date. It's based on the end to the outbreak period. And again, that has to be announced by the government. We talked about the timeline for the first payment being 40 days. Timeline, 45 days. Timeline for the normal monthly payments once someone is enrolled in COBRA is usually the first of the month, but there's a 30-day grace period. So all of these different timelines with respect to the employee or the COBRA qualifier, their timelines are the ones that have that extension applicable. Next slide, please. A couple issues, certainly this is going to definitely cause delays in premium payments. What could cause a big problem is if an employee is utilizing this extension and they end up being a few months behind or several months behind in making their payments, where as an employer you can't terminate them from COBRA, but it's going to be challenging for the employee to be able to come up with that lump sum once we have our true clock running, it could be very challenging for them to come up with a large lump sum payment to get them caught up. The other thing to be aware of is COBRA claims. So if someone is, utilizing these extensions and then they have a medical situation, it's important the employee understands that they can never be denied treatment by a healthcare provider, but they could be expected to pay out of pocket and then file for reimbursement once they've got all of their COBRA requirements up to date, such as their documentation, their signatures, and then of course payment. Next slide, please. So again, there is no published date for the end of the outbreak period yet. So you want to make sure if you're self-administering COBRA that you're looking back in your records. Have you terminated any COBRA beneficiaries after March 1st due to non-payment? If you have a system in place that is calculating that 60 days, you want to make sure that it's not automatically making those folks ineligible now that we have this kind of open-ended extension. It's also important that you're educating your employees when it comes to COBRA, that, COBRA is designed to be continuous. Whatever date their group benefits stop, COBRA has to pick up immediately. They can't stop or suspend coverage in the middle, or if they're eligible April 1st, but they don't really want to start COBRA till June 1st, that's not possible. Next slide, please. So with regard to how do we get to an end of this national emergency? Well, it's really something, as I mentioned, that has to be done by the government. So Congress can do that through joint resolution or certainly by a presidential proclamation. Anytime there's a national emergency going on, the National Emergency Act requires that Congress is meeting at least every 6 months. We know they're meeting far more frequently than that around everything with COVID. So I'm not sure when we could possibly hear an end to this national emergency, because it truly does trigger so many other things that are in place due to the fact that we've got a national emergency in place. So it'll be interesting to hear. Certainly when we get word of it, we will let everybody know, but at this point there is no end date, so our clock is kind of in limbo. Next slide. Just wanted to make a quick note on this next slide. And again, these slides will be available to you after the presentation when Alexandria sends out the thank you. So I'm not going to read all the information on these. I'd like to make them a little wordy so that when we do provide them later, that you can, dive in and read through everything. But something I wanted to just point out quickly is, especially during what's going on, the current climate today, we've had a lot of questions from employers about wanting to pay for the COBRA premium for a certain amount of time. Employers are truly doing a lot to try to support and help their employees, especially when this is, as I mentioned, not just a health issue, it's an economic issue right now. So it's just important that if you are looking to subsidize some of the COBRA or all of the COBRA for your employees, that you just be very careful to make sure you're not doing anything discriminatory, that you're treating everyone the same. Next slide, please. So recently we did have an update to the model notices. I feel like the model notices that we've had have been out there for, gosh, many, many, many years and have not really ever been updated. I think since maybe 2011. It's been quite a while. But they did just update them recently. So if you're using a copy of the model notices and you've got those saved somewhere or printed somewhere, it's going to be important that you go out and grab the new set. Both the general initial notice as well as the event and election notice, both have changed. Now, incidentally, they did not change due to this extension, because truly the extension is temporary. Even though we don't have an end date and we can't publish that, it's still a temporary situation. What they did was they updated both pieces with this additional question: can I enroll in Medicare instead of COBRA after my group health plan coverage ends? So essentially, they made this amendment just to include some additional verbiage to assist Medicare eligible folks. But it is critical that you go out, and if you're self-administering your own COBRA in-house, you want to make sure that you've grabbed these updated notices. Next slide, please, Alex. So a few other pieces of guidance that I wanted to attach in here, especially during this time of the extension. We talked a bit ago, a few slides ago, about when an employee is utilizing this extension and haven't paid their premiums, which is okay at this point. But it's going to be important for you to contact your insurance carriers to discuss how they prefer to be communicated with. What is their process? And this could be different for every carrier. It's hard to say. It could be something similar in one state and different in another state. So it's important to contact your carriers to say, okay, due to these extensions, if we have an employee who goes past the traditional 30-day grace period where they normally would be terminated, but due to this extension, we can't terminate, how do we notify you to hold claim payments? You know, things like that. You want to make sure that you're talking to your carriers. Find out in advance. You don't want to wait until you have a situation. You want to find out in advance. Again, although some legal experts are saying the due date for employers to furnish their event notice is extended, others say differently. So let's stick to the original timeline. Now, I'm not an attorney. I do not play one on TV. All I can do is disseminate the information that's out there to you guys. And because there are conflicting statements and nothing definitive from the Department of Labor, our recommendation is to stick to the original timeline for what the employer is required to do. Another piece of guidance is look at contacting your COBRA participants who terminated due to non-payment after March 1st. It would be wise to contact them and just confirm, hey, you know, you were terminated for non-payment, but there are some extensions out due to coronavirus. Just wanted to make sure, did you mean to terminate for non-payment, or, you know, are you still in need of coverage? So consider sending some type of request. And again, you want to do everything in writing. If they say, no, I really didn't need the coverage, I just didn't contact you, consider getting something in writing, just so you can put that on file. Again, you will hear me say through every webinar I ever do, which is a lot of them, documentation is critical. Anytime a government entity requires you to be compliant with their rules and regulations, you want to make sure you are documenting everything and keeping that documentation for, I recommend, more years than they normally publish. So if it's 3 years, I just keep them. You know, so it's important to make sure you're aware of how long each entity requires. So we know the IRS requires that you maintain filings for 7 years. You know, they're all different. They often don't have any kind of uniform guidelines. So it's important that you're maintaining documentation in the proper places and for the proper amount of time. So I kept it to 30 minutes. I'm excited about that. My goal is to give you some high-level information, dig into a few bits and pieces of it, but allow ample time. Again, this is for you guys. I want to allow ample time to answer your questions. So Alex, I'm going to take a drink of water. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. Hi, everybody.
Lovely.
I'm going to take off the screen share, and like I said, I will make sure everybody gets a copy of the presentation when we are complete. So let's see. So we do have a few questions here, Angie. I hate that when I do that, it gets my screens all mushed around. Let's see. So we had a couple questions in our chat box. First one is from Mr. Paul Miller. With the extension of election period until after an outbreak, can someone not respond and go without insurance until they find out that they have a problem and then elect?
That's a great question. And yes, they technically can. And if you think about COBRA throughout the years, essentially you have 60 days to elect COBRA. If you wait till day 59 and elect COBRA, you still have to back pay those prior months, because remember, we said COBRA is continuous. So there can't be any lapse in coverage. This is where, in one of the items to consider as being a potential issue is if they wait, and let's say they wait 4 or 5 months, and then they come back and say, oh, you know what, I need to elect COBRA. They need to be prepared for paying that giant lump sum of back premium. That can be sketchy. But yes, essentially that 60 days to elect COBRA is now open-ended until we have a true published end to the national emergency date.
Awesome, thank you. Next one is from a Miss Donna Guess. If someone is already on COBRA before March 1st, is there any extension or allowance made for payment of the premium during the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Donna. It's very important that you're aware this isn't just for newly eligible COBRA participants. This is existing COBRA participants. So if you have someone that's been on COBRA for several months, and we're now in the situation of the pandemic and these extensions. So traditionally, their premium is due probably the first of every month. If they don't make their payment by the first of the month, they have a 30-day grace period. That grace period is being extended. So yes, they do. And it's going to be important to continue communication with your employees, because again, we don't want them to be put in a position where they have to come up with a large chunk of money.
Awesome. Next one is from Kelly Maloney. Can there be different response dates from employees? For instance, they immediately respond to their COBRA rights for a voluntary plan, say dental, and remit payment. They do not respond in regards to medical, but months later they do respond and they want medical coverage. Are these different response dates allowed?
So traditionally, the different response dates have always been allowed as long as you're still in that 60-day window. So someone can say right away, you know, I just want dental, and send that in, remit their premium, but they're still within that first 60-day window, and they come back and say, you know what, I do want to add medical. That's totally okay. It's after the 60-day window that they cannot make any other election changes. So with regard to the fact that the 60-day window has now been extended, then essentially that could happen, that they could come back later. It's important to talk to your carriers about this as well. But yeah, based on the way that extension looks, they could come back, because technically we don't have an end date to their actual 60 days to elect.
Awesome. And then one last one that's here from Teresa Foster. If an employee was enrolled before March 2020, are we still not allowed to cancel them due to non-payment?
So if they were enrolled prior and they're just going on their regular monthly payments, if they're late on their payment after March 1st, then you can't really terminate them physically. You can contact the carrier and discuss suspending claim payments until they get caught up on payment, but to physically terminate is where we're going to have a problem.
Got it. Okay, great. Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to unmute yourself or show yourself on video. We'd love to see all your faces. It's my favorite part. But anybody else have any questions or anything else that we can address or kind of chat with you about? Please go ahead and unmute and video yourself.
Yes, being in this virtual world for so long, I've never been on camera so much in my life, but it is good to see faces.
Hi, this is Graciela. How are you?
Hi there. Good, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Hey, so I work for a brokerage firm, and my question is more related to state continuation and the managing of state continuation benefits. How does that fit in here?
So state continuation is going to be based on the state. Now, at this point, the extensions are based on federal COBRA. So if you're looking at state continuation, let's say for mini COBRA, that's something you're going to have to check into what that state is saying. It's not been publicized to my knowledge that the federal requirement falls into state requirements as well. It could be a very different story. If you would like to share your email with us privately and what state, I'd be happy to take a look for you.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else while you have me? Oh, Alex, you're on mute if you were chatting.
Oh, ask her the question. She's our guru. Don't be shy. Let us know. We don't know if you don't ask. I think I'm talking to my kids here. Okay.
All right, awesome. Well, we appreciate you guys so much for joining us for our very first Compliance Corner. We will keep you up to date when the next one is. There's a great Meet Our Team. We're so interested in faces these days because we haven't seen anybody for months and months and months. But definitely make sure to connect with us on social media. We always put reminders out there. We share a lot of great resources out there. And we will continue to let you know when our next event is. When you get an invitation from us, feel free to share that with your friends, your colleagues. Again, this is a free resource. We're happy to have as many folks join as would like to, and we'll let you know ahead of time what next month's topic is going to be.
Actually, yes, awesome. So next month is August, and next our presentations are going to be the second Thursday of the month, and next August would be the 13th. So look for the invite. Like Andrew said, please feel free to share. These are really to educate all of you, be it employer, broker, however it comes about. We love to talk to everybody. Again, keep an eye on your email. I will send out a copy of the presentation, as well as feel free to share all of our information on our public YouTube page. We'll have the recording posted there. And thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next month. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your day.